What's up, Black Comic Lords? Once again, you're on with Shadow Factor, our monthly recap show of the Shadow Cabinet series with the great Joe Illidge. What's up, Joe? How are you, sir?
All right. How's everyone doing tonight?
We are great. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you for patiently waiting. We are in the building. Shout out to Vagrant, ALJ, Damon Watson, Marwan Williams, Pericles Dragon Balls in the house.
Oh man, got a good crew here. Thank you all for coming.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Before we get started, please hit the like button, share this video. We're trying to make everyone see what we're doing and get as many people in here as possible to talk about this great book. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and so you'll know when the next video airs. It's free and it helps out the channel. Thank you very much. So, Joe, give us a recap of where we are.
Wow. Okay. So, this issue started with Rocket having to evacuate the headquarters that she and Curtis Metcalf.
No. What happened before this issue? Recap of what got us to this point.
Okay. So in the second issue of Shadow Cabinet, a few things happened. The big thing, two big things, was that the Blood Syndicate was captured by a mercenary named Sanction. And who Sanction's boss was, we don't know. But he was hired in Shadow Cabinet 1 to take out the Blood Syndicate, which he did in Shadow Cabinet 2. The other big thing that happened was that Curtis Metcalf got captured. Now, he's been a fugitive going back to Hardware Season 1, Number 1. And after Icon versus Hardware, he basically went off grid. He was living underground, literally in this base underground. And when Rocket was the only one out there fighting the fight, he admired that. He had so much respect for her. So he helped her and basically said, hey, I have this whole apparatus here. I will back you up. And together we'll have a combined mission. And that's what they were doing for like 6 months. But he finally got caught because time runs out for everybody. Right? And the person who caught him was Angela Alva. Right? And she's basically like, time for you and I to have a talk. And it's a pretty big one. And so that is where we're left. And starting off Shadow Cabinet 3.
It's incredible. We said in the promos for this episode that secrets would be revealed, and you certainly did that.
Yes.
This was a big issue. This was a dense issue.
Yes.
You packed a lot of stuff in this issue, like a lot.
Thank you. One more thing I want to mention also is that we found out what was going on with Static in the last issue. And Static is basically now just protecting his family and his neighborhood.
Right.
That's his position now, because he almost lost his family in Icon versus Hardware. And he was like, I'm not leaving them again. So his neighborhood, his block, is basically a stay the fuck away zone. He's tagged it. You come there, he'll kick your ass. So that's where he stands. So, okay, those are the three major status quos leading us to Shadow Cabinet 3.
All right, so here is the covers for Shadow Cabinet 3.
Right.
On the left, we've got the great GOAT, Dennis Cowan. On the right, we've got Nicholas Draper Ivy.
Yep.
I love the details on this Nicholas Draper Ivy picture. You can see the milestone M on the jacket. You can see the name Hardware. You see Dwayne McDuffie. You see Cowan and McDuffie's names on there. Just a lot of details in that image. Now, the picture on the left is actually, I think we mentioned this in the last episode,
yes,
an homage to the introduction of Sanction back in Hardware. Was it 6? I think
25.
It was 25.
This is from Hardware 25, and yeah, one of our He's usually here. Kobe Brewster totally saw that reference before we mentioned it. But yes, this was an intentional homage to that. When editor Marquise Draper and I were talking, and he was like, "Hey, you have any thoughts about what the cover of issue 3 should be?" And I said, "I'm going to throw something crazy at you. Let me know what you think." And he saw it. He was like, "That's a choice." and so we did it, and it was just so appropriate, right? Because in the original Hardware 25, you had Sanction, who captured Curtis Metcalf and basically was going through his entire career as Hardware and putting him on trial. And now you have Angela Alva, who's turned out to be the new nemesis of the Milestone universe. And basically, she's caught Metcalf, and they have to have a talk.
And in both of these instances, he's captured by these people, and Curtis doesn't know why. He doesn't know the motivations as to why these people have been hired, or their motivations for why these people have captured him.
That's right.
So, the revelations happen thereafter, which is exactly what happens in this issue.
That's right.
So let's jump into it.
Okay.
We see that Rocket, the whole base that she's been sharing with Curtis Metcalf, is falling apart.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the narration in these word bubbles here are from apparently Dharma. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
I can
Dharma,
see the past.
who heads the Shadow Cabinet. That's right.
Who heads the Shadow Cabinet? He's a clairvoyant.
Yep.
I can see the past, present, and future of every person on Earth. But Raquel Irvin, she vexes me. I offered the girl a chance to save herself from a terrible death, looming on the horizon with bloody promise. She refused, forcing me to life into the further
turmoil.
It's interesting. She is at the crux of this book.
Yes.
But in a larger sense, Raquel Irvin has always been at the very crux of the Milestone universe.
Yep.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But she's always on the precipice of being someone that people are invested into her future. Her future has always been a question mark of intrigue for the Milestone universe. And I would say both in the original series, even in Milestone 2.0, her future is always a big question mark. People have a lot of anticipation for her future.
Yes. And there's a lot of speculation. There have been stories about what her future could look like. Stephanie Williams, really talented writer, doing stuff for DC and Marvel. She wrote a story about a future Raquel Irvin in the Milestone 30th anniversary special, in which Raquel Irvin became the new icon.
Exactly.
Right. So, like you said, there are different speculations and interpretations of what her future will be.
So as this base is falling around her, Curtis leaves behind a message, an AI message, sort of one of those, in case of disaster, break glass, and this is where we're going to be.
That's
basically instructing her, to get out of Dodge. I've got some stuff prepared for you. Just get out of here.
Right.
But do you think, what I found interesting about this is Curtis is super brilliant, not just as a technical engineer, but you see his brilliance as a strategist as well, someone who thinks steps ahead, to have planned this far ahead, to know that if things go wrong with him, he has a plan for Raquel.
Well, yeah, and there's a number of things to that. Number one, Curtis Metcalf knows that he's not the best version of a human being. He knows how flawed he is, and he's pretty self-aware, and he's cool with that. He's unapologetic about who he is, but he knows that this girl is better than him. And that's why at some point in the 6 months he saved her, and that's why he backed up her operation, and that's why he considers her his equal, because she's better than him. And it is the responsibility of older people to uplift the best younger people. That's one responsibility of elders. He recognized that. He also knows that, you know, he thinks in terms of science and physics. He understands entropy, right? He couldn't be on the run forever. His time was going to run out, and either he was going to win or lose. And if he lost, there had to be the in case of emergency break glass plan. And this is it. And she doesn't even know what's coming next.
Right.
But basically, this place that was her home for 6 months is falling apart. And I really wanted to communicate in the script. And look, let's be clear. Obviously, this is Daryl Banks. This is Adagun Ilhan. This is Dennis Cowan. This is Chris Sotomayor bringing these words to life, taking them to new dimension. But one of the things I wanted to communicate here is that as human beings, we develop attachments to places. When those places end, it's not casual, it's apocalyptic, and it's unfortunately cosmically unfortunate that we're talking about this in the aftermath of the LA fires.
Yeah.
And so many people losing their homes, and our reality is so fragile, right? And so that's what I wanted to help communicate here, that it's all fragile and things change, and sometimes terribly, and we're constantly moving. Rocket is I think I told you in the very beginning in our first interview, she's a vertical thinker. She's always moving in a line. She doesn't look in the rear view mirror, right? Not from an emotional perspective. I think from an emotional perspective, there's a destination, and that's where she's headed. So this is a part of her journey that is painful.
What's interesting is I think Curtis instinctually recognizes that he was providing her a home. And
Yes.
you see the very last thing he says to her is, "It's up to you now. I'm sorry. I'm
Yes.
sorry to put you in this position. I'm sorry this is happening to you. I'm sorry because I know I promised that I would be there for you and I'd support you and help you on this journey, but I can't do that. It's up to you." So I thought
Yeah.
that was a really well done way to end that message by you. I thought that was a good line.
Thank you.
All right. So she's bugging out. She's going on the stealth ship. I see this robot. This robot reminds me of Herbie from Fantastic Four, the old
Yeah, from the
Fantastic Four
Fantastic
cartoon.
Four cartoon. I think it was the late 70s, the super late 70s when that came out. It's interesting because, so it's funny. I called him, that's the robot from Shadow Cabinet 1 that serves Raquel the energy soda, the Raspberry Rush energy soda that Curtis Metcalf made as this beverage that also has like nano tracers and electrolytes. And so, that's Bernie. And I think, Daryl Banks, who designed him, was really looking at the robots of the 70s and 80s. You had Herbie from the Fantastic Four cartoon. You had Tweaky from the Buck Rogers film that became a TV show. You had, I think, Maximilian from this science fiction film called The Black Hole. So I think Daryl was looking at this as this common aesthetic between the robots of the time, and he kind of, that's how he modeled Bernie. And it's so kind of, again, this is really sad, right? Because like Bernie was kind of like, Bernie was like her Alfred or something like that. And, it's like now it's all falling apart, and she's got to say bye to Bernie, and she's never going to see Bernie again. And, it's these things are emotional. You know what I mean? They're
It's cool.
emotional.
He
And
even made the eyebrows look like he's sad, like little
yes,
details like that. I thought, and
yes,
the way his hands are, where he's kind of like, "I'm sorry, what about
yes.
me?" Like,
Yes, that is Mr. Banks. That is the skill of Mr. Darryl Banks right there.
That's
Yes.
brilliant.
Yes.
And shout out to Chris Sotomayor. His coloring work is fantastic. Look at just the variation of colors just within the flames.
Yep.
Um,
Yes. That's right.
yeah,
That's
he
right.
does fantastic. A lot of colorists don't get enough credit for what they do. The color
Chris,
scheme, the palette that he uses is pretty cool.
he's one of the most artistically literate colorists out there. I mean,
Yeah.
Chris goes back to the first milestone with myself and so many other people, and he was taught by the best, and now he's one of those leader colorists in the industry, and he teaches coloring. So having him on this book was really great. And yeah, this issue, we'll talk a little more as we go along, but this issue, as you said, it has a lot, and so how it's structured was intentional, and he really stepped up and brought it all together.
Yeah. So fast forward to Curtis. He's been captured. Angela begins the interrogation.
Yeah.
Talking about, she's always emphasizing, you're fighting my blood. You're fighting my family. She's obsessed with the bloodline.
Yes.
And you're always wondering why. And I remember asking you in the very first episode, as I'm looking at her and I'm looking at pictures of Edwin Alvin, I'm like, why is she so? Her coloring is, talking about Chris Sotomayor and his coloring. Her coloring is different.
Yes.
And I believe you gave me a coy answer, like there'll be answers about that later.
You're right. I told you we were gonna get to the story.
You did. But
yeah.
What reminds me, as you talk about Chris Sotomayor and being one of those Milestone alumni from the original Milestone back in the day, one of the benchmarks of the original Milestone was the fact that it was the first comic book that I recall in my mind, in my memory, that actually had variations of skin tones.
100%.
That coloring process, the Milestone, was it called Milestone 100?
Yes.
Coloring process.
Yes.
It was the first one to do that.
Yes.
With almost watercolor type colors.
It was watercolored. Was a technique that I think Noel C. Giddings, who was founding colorist and first color editor of the company, basically set up the Milestone 100 coloring system. And yes, the pages would be reduced and printed on watercolor paper. And basically it was as if you were painting. She was literally painting on the pages, and the variation of complexions was something that we never really saw in superhero comics in the North American space until Milestone. And that's something that's very important. Like from the very beginning, Angela's this apparently like very light-skinned Black woman, like presumably biracial, right? And if you look at the very first scene, I think with Rocket and Curtis Metcalf, they have different complexions, right? This is part of what says, oh my goodness, we have, oh my goodness. Sensei Reginald Hudlin is in the house. The sensei's in the house. So, and when we get to her origin, we have to do a shout out to the sensei. But so this was very important. And by the way, I don't know if a lot of people caught up on this, but for your super geek cred, this page is an homage to Amazing Spider-Man 39 and 40, in which Norman Osborn reveals himself as the Green Goblin, and he's got Peter Parker bound to this chair in these cables, and you can see his clothing ripped, and you see the Spider-Man costume underneath, and that was homaged in Across the Spider-Verse at the end when the Prowler captured Miles Morales.
Yeah.
Right? So this is an homage to the work of the great John Romita Sr., God rest his soul, in one of the most iconic superhero, supervillain shots we've ever seen in comics.
Wow. I love your work, Joe Illidge.
Like, listen, bringing the literacy. Oh, the other sensei, the first founder of Milestone, Dennis Cowan, is in the house, so you know it's a party.
And I even have my Icon T-shirt on.
Oh, look at that, man! That's
all
what's
right. So she's, as I said, she's always obsessed with the blood. She's talking about the two of you are alike. I mean, she's always trying to establish this almost like familial relationship between Curtis and Edwin, and says you're basically the same under the skin.
Yeah.
She keeps dropping these little Easter eggs about these relationships.
Yeah.
And she's looking even more swarthy than normal here. It's like, who is this woman?
Yeah.
So she talks about her origin, and this goes back to 1923.
Yes.
And you reveal a character which has me now somewhat semi-obsessed. Talk about this page. Talk about this.
Okay, so way back when Reggie and Dennis and I first started talking about this, we were talking about doing like this flashback scene like in the 20s, right? And this like brother vigilante who was like saving black people from like the Klan and stuff like that, right? And we're like, okay, let's get him in here, right? So basically this is Hardware 1923, right? And you've got this black man with a one-man crusade for justice. He's got these advanced weapons, right? And the big thing is he has a benefactor, and the benefactor is a black man who's an albino, so he's passing for white. And he's wealthy, and he's very scientifically inclined. He has a brilliant inventor's mind. And so basically, this is Angela saying to Curtis, you're not that unique, bro. It's like humanity exists in echoes, right? You are an echo of an idea. And 101 years ago, there was some other guy out there doing what you're doing, thinking what you're thinking, whose benefactor was a rich dude with white skin, right?
Major secret reveal of the Milestone universe #1.
Yes.
We always think of Hardware #1 as the first appearance of Hardware. It's actually this, which is Hardware #0 from 1923.
Yes.
When you look at the details here, write down, this is what's cool. For my old time original Milestone 1.0 fans, even look at his mask. I don't know what the mask is made out of, but it reminds me of the work that Dennis Cowan did on the original Hardware, who had like this sort of black exoskeleton bodysuit of nanites, created by nanites. That look, the texture of it reminds me of that.
Yeah.
And then you've got him with a machete in one hand and a gun in the other, which was kind of the weapon set that Hardware had, right? The Hardware that we know.
Right.
And then you also have him with the hook, with the rope attached to it, which reminds you to the hook and chain that Curtis always had.
Bingo.
I remember seeing Dennis Cowan doing an interview once about, why'd you have him do a hook? And he was like, he just thought it was cool.
Listen,
it was the most original thing.
But remember, the first issue is called Angry Black Man, right? It's like, so your arsenal, you know, like character design is character, form follows function, and his arsenal is the arsenal of someone who basically is releasing their anger on their enemies. So their arsenal is not a passive arsenal.
Absolutely.
It's an active, brutal arsenal, right? So this came from a talk that Reggie and Dennis and I had, and it just seemed to like fit perfectly to activate this whole 100-year mystery that we're now unraveling here.
So do we have a name for this character?
We do not have a name for this character.
Not yet.
Right. If we see this character again, we'll have a name for him, but right now we don't have one.
All right. So that was my next question. My next obvious question. I'm now intrigued and somewhat obsessed with this guy. I need to know who this guy is. I want his backstory. He reminds me of that Boondocks episode with the introduction of Catcher Freeman.
Yeah.
Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, of course.
That's what this guy reminds me of. I'm like, damn, this would be a dope series. Kind of a Catcher Freeman meets Django Unchained, all together. This is kind of cool. I hope and pray that you will have the opportunity to expand upon this character in the future.
That would be nice. And listen, let's just say how as we roll out, this story, how it was really important for Dennis to do these flashbacks, and it was an ask. It was a personal ask, and he said yes. And when you see how this unfolds, it was just perfect that he did them.
I didn't even realize that. Yeah, this is Dennis's artwork.
This is the beginning of his. He does 2 flashbacks, and this is him, and he's inked by Prentice Rollins. So they go back.
Another Milestone alum.
Yeah, they go back to Milestone 1.0. Prentice became Dennis's regular inker there. Bill Sienkiewicz would work over at Dennis on other series like Dr. Zero, which was a Marvel book, which was part of a special line of comics, The Question. But Prentice was, I feel like, Dennis's top inker in the early Milestone. So we got the dream team to come back for this special occasion.
This is fantastic. As a Milestone guy, which I am, this is fantastic. And the cool thing is, if you ever get to do this story again in the future, expand on this character, you could literally do Hardware versus Icon all over again, because Icon exists in 1923.
You could.
And I think when Reggie Hudlin redid the story at this point, Icon does have a little bit more powers. So he actively has his powers in 1923.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
That would be a great crossover flashback type of. Oh God, I'm getting myself amped up for a book that doesn't exist. All right, all right. Let's talk about this. So Edwin Alvin's ancestor is this guy, Maynard Chamberlain.
Yes,
he is an albino man passing his white.
Yes,
and he was the benefactor for the original Icon back in the day.
The original Hardware, yes.
Hardware.
He was the guy, because we know that during the times of the Harlem Renaissance, that a number of authors and artists, they had benefactors. A number of those benefactors were wealthy white people.
Right.
And so if you take that kind of benefactor society and the idea and you extend it outward to vigilantism, right? That's how you get this relationship, right? You basically have someone who understands they need to make a difference, but in secret, so they need to use somebody else. And by the way, this guy's black. But he's passing as white.
Major Milestone secret reveal number 2.
Yes.
He establishes a family.
Right.
Who apparently did not realize that he was black. I think it was he passing to his wife as well?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
He has kids. Edwin is born. Apparently appears white, so there's no questions there.
Right.
He was a self-made man, which is interesting because as Angela's going through this history, she's pointing out the parallels between Edwin and Curtis. Ultimately becoming a weapons manufacturer, working for the CIA. But he's not alone. Edwin had a sister
1 year later.
1 year later, she
Yep.
came out different looking than Edwin.
Yep.
You phrased it as a butterscotch baby.
Yes. Now,
Talk
for me,
about
that goes back to butterscotch candy, right?
I
Because
know.
I was born in 1969, right? Angela Alva is in her 60s. So, these are the frame of reference. The frames of reference that she will use will be for someone of her age. So
Yeah.
describing herself that way, that just makes sense. And to your point, you see again, this is about echoes, right? Like these idea echoes of certain models of people throughout life. Edwin was Curtis growing up, right?
Right.
And so then you think, oh, that's why he picked that kid. Because in that kid, he recognized himself. And if there's any theories that Edwin Alva is a racist, he is not. Because he's biracial. It's never about race for him. It's
Right.
always about class. And again, nod to Reggie Hudlin, because Reggie wanted to do something really daring with Alva's heritage, right? And kind of drop in that melanin in his history. And so, I really thought about the concept. There's a concept, it's a basic concept in comics. It's show, don't tell, right? So I was like,
Right.
okay, what's the best way to show that heritage? And that's to have a relative who's got black skin roll up and basically be like, hey, I'm an Alva. And where I got that from, I remember when I first mentioned it, I said to Marquise Draper, you could tell Reggie and Dennis, it's this, right? So in the 80s, so my mom was a big soap opera head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned out to be a soap opera head. Daytime soap operas, nighttime soap operas. And it was a very popular show, which I think at one point must have been the most watched show on planet Earth. And it was called Dynasty.
Right.
And Dynasty was about this rich white family called the Carringtons and rich people wars. And one day, Diane Carroll, this beautiful black woman, just rolls up in there. And at the end of a particular season, she says, I'm a Carrington. And you're like, what the what? Right? So, and so I took the Dynasty thing and I said, okay, let's bring Dynasty to the Milestone universe, right? So that's who Angela Alva is, right? And we created the whole history for her. And from a visual standpoint, when I write characters, it helps me to kind of have a real world person as a reference point.
Yeah.
So my reference point for Angela Alva is Vanessa Williams, who I
Okay.
think now is in The Devil Wears Prada.
Right. Right. I was gonna say Lena Horne, but yeah, Vanessa
Oh
Williams.
my God, well, Lena Horne. But Vanessa Williams was really like my North Star when I was writing Angela.
How long ago did Reggie cook all this up?
Oh my goodness. We that was about it. I think that conversation happened like a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's dope.
And it was all going back forth through emails. It was like, and then it's like, oh, okay, I know what I'm gonna do. And then Angela Alva just erupted from my head and I just giggled because I love her to bits. And this issue basically lets you know who this person is and what they really, really want.
Right. Let me tell you. So as she's born, she's immediately rejected.
Right.
The maid is paid off to leave town and raise Butterscotch as her own. She raises herself up. Now, in true Alva fashion, she's also a self-made person as well, educating herself, brilliant mind, etc. What I think would be an interesting twist would be if this maid, whose name is never said, is actually a Metcalf. That would be a twist.
That would be wild. It's funny because there's a lot about his family, Metcalf's family, we don't know.
Exactly.
Right? But I will say that it's funny you say that because, you know, in thinking about the Alva lineage, you know, as I constructed it, I was highly inspired by Brandon Thomas's Hardware Season 1. And I
Right.
really thought about what kind of history can lead us to that Edwin Alva, right? So I really tried to think about, okay, what's the line, what's the lineage, what's the path, you know? So, but yeah, Angela's an interesting character, and we don't see much of her mama, but we know enough to know that her mama is a pretty resourceful older black woman from the day, which, listen, that's what the sisters were. That's what they've always been. Black women have always been superhuman.
Right.
Right? And Angela's mother was no different, and she raised Angela with the high standard, like, girl, you're gonna have to be 2 or 3 times as good in the white man's world.
Right. But she
You
also
know?
took advantage of her light skin.
Oh
Um,
yes. Oh yes.
yeah, passing where she could, fitting in where she could. She married a rich white dude to help be his beard to keep his secrets,
Yep.
and became a self-made person. In
Yes.
fact, she doesn't even find out about her heritage until she has a car accident and there's a blood transfusion question, and all the secrets are revealed as to why that transfusion can't take
Right,
place.
because the person she thinks is her mother, her blood is totally incompatible.
Right.
There's no genetic connection to them at all. And you got to think about this. You almost died. Your body is half broken, and your mother's blood doesn't connect with you. And that's when you find out everything. That's the worst possible moment to find out everything.
Right.
Everything. Right?
So what does she decide to do with it? What do you decide to do with tragedy and bad news? Well, I'm gonna have a new obsession. My new obsession is to track down this hardware guy. Emulate my brother. What's curious is what is motivating her at this point when she decides, hey, I now know who I am. I now know I'm an Alva. Who is Alva? What do I need? Do I need to be like him? What's his obsession? Why is he obsessed with hardware? What's going through her mind in terms of her obsession?
Well,
Without being a spoiler. Without being a spoiler.
yeah, I mean, from her point of view, she was robbed.
Right.
She was robbed of a life path. And Angela Alva is a millionaire, but Edwin Alva is a billionaire.
With a B.
And if you think those two are the same, you don't understand. You don't understand money. Because, I mean, a billionaire, that's an entirely different species. That's another conversation. But that's her perspective. Like, I'm a millionaire. I got robbed of the life path to be a billionaire by parents who gave me away like so much trash. And when I see the name that is mine on this building and other buildings around the world, and this name heralded, and that's mine, that's an injustice that I cannot tolerate anymore.
Major milestone secret number 3. She even makes her way out to try and hook up with the Love Corporation.
Yeah, the
Or
Love Corp.
yeah,
And they reject.
and rejected
Yeah, yeah,
for obvious reasons.
yeah.
You're a villain.
It's interesting. Well, what's interesting is, so the Love Corps was established by Reggie Hudlin and I think, well, originally Icon and Rocket,
Right.
right? That series. So it was Reggie and Leon Chills and Dougie Braithwaite And, you know, they're this group of powerful women who are trying to guide society towards its better destination, right? So they're like a myth, but Angela is in circles of money, so she hears about myths. And she's like, this is this group of women. I'm a woman who has suffered an injustice of identity and life. Certainly they're going to help me, yeah? And they don't, because their idea of what's just and her idea of what's just are two entirely different things.
Right. I really, as an aside, I really want to see the Love Corps come back.
Me
That's
too.
a concept that needs to.
Me too. They're great characters. There's a lot
Great
of
characters.
there's so much to unpack with them, and so it was fun to be able to have them in here for one panel and kind of like having, you know, it's interesting when we do these myth stories. We usually see men do certain things. We don't see women do them. So having, you know, Angela climb the Arctic mountains to find this temple and this secret society of people to get help. Having a Black woman do that, that's cool, right? Because usually it's only white men like Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins that
That's
gets to
exactly
do it,
what this thing looks like.
right? That gets to do a thing like that, right? So it was cool to have Angela do it.
So we're catching back up with Rocket. She's escaped from the exploding base, going to a preset coordinates given by Curtis. And we run across at this new base that Curtis has established for her, this
Yeah.
character duo. Talk about this.
So Duo, you know, Duo goes back to an earlier story in the Milestone relaunch. Basically, Duo is the fusion of a married couple, David and Kelly, and they're like the world's renowned nanotechnologists, right? Which then is, of course, a 21st century echo of the 20th century Milestone series Zombie. But in Zombie, David was the character and Kelly was his assistant. And when he became Zombie at the expense of Kelly's life because the nanotechnology in his body in an accident that almost killed him was immediately looking for another source of matter to repair the rest of his body. And so Kelly was the nearest form of human organic matter. And so the nanotechnology ate her alive to save him. And when he wakes up, she's dead, right? But in the 21st century version, they're a married couple. And due to a terrible series of events, they become fused into one being called Duo. And so, you know, Greg Pak is a friend of mine and wanted to kind of, you know, bring Duo into this. And that was something that Marquise Draper, the editor, was excited about as well. So we were really thinking about, okay, what's the way to do it that makes sense, considering how the Duo miniseries ended. So in this case, the Duo that Raquel meets is a hologram. It's a hologram representation of the original Duo.
You know, it's interesting. Again, we've mentioned nanotechnology. You know, Milestone was one of the first books I recall ever seeing that technology used 30 years ago in
Yes.
the first hardware book. Curtis used to go through this inertia winder, which
Yes.
you made reference to in this book too. Thank you for that.
Yes.
He used to go through this inertia winder to put on the hardware suit and cover himself with that black coating.
Yes.
Which, you know, Dennis Cowan said in the interview we had with him that was nanotechnology in retrospect. So
Oh,
I
it's
just
great.
that
A fan
technology always pops up. But the reason I bring it up is for a reason that's going to come up in a few minutes.
Yes. But nanotechnology is important, and part of what's explained to Rocket is that the invasion of Brainiac set a series of events in motion, and one of them was, when you're talking about technology, one of its applications is war, and you're talking about a race, right? So in the 60s, it was the space race. It's who's going to get to the moon first. Will it be the Russians or will it be the Americans, right? And that has symbolic applications that connected to war, right? So now it's a nanotechnology race, right?
So this base, she comes in, Duo's there saying, "Hey, Curtis told us to help you up and hook you up with stuff." He
Right.
builds her a suit. Talk about this suit.
Well,
what you can tell us without spoiling it.
Yeah. Well, again, this is her inheritance, and basically Curtis was setting her up to, go forth and continue her fight better armed, right? So if you look at this whole headquarters, the aesthetic of it is more Stanley Kubrick. It's clean.
And this base is for her. Curtis built this base, or
100%, because he's a man of contingency plans.
Right.
So this was a contingency plan if the other location ever got compromised, when it did, which it did. So this is very clean. It's larger, full of lighting, and this is her inheritance, right? Which is part of the core theme of this entire story. It's about the inheritance of power, and what do you do with it when you get it. This is Raquel's inheritance, whereas Angela Alva is getting hers by force, right? So we have this unity of opposites, where you have this young woman who is being given the means, and you have an older woman who had been robbed of it. Right? So that's why this story is about the both of them. Yeah.
Raquel doesn't know what to do with this. This is all a bit overwhelming for her.
Yes.
She lost Icon. She's feeling some type of way about that. Doesn't know where he is. She tries to go on without him. Hooks up with Curtis Metcalf as a partner to try and continue the quest, continue the battle, continue the good fight. Now Curtis is captured. He's gone, presumably dead. Sets her up with a new base with new people. She doesn't know these people. And is given added responsibility of doing all this solo with now new gear. She has a moment. She has a moment.
It all crashes down on her, and I think that's something that we don't see enough in the genre, but because the Milestone universe is a more naturalistic universe, we can deal with these things, right? And this is the same thing that happened to Virgil Hawkins in a different way, right? It's the cumulative effect of all of it, right? And we read these stories, and the heroes just keep going.
Right.
And it's like
that's the brilliance of this, and the fact that you've got both Virgil and her having this cumulative effect of all the stuff that they've gone through, and not just shake it off or brush it off, adds that human element to it. And it also adds to the hero's journey, because you see them overcome their own fears and their own trauma and be brave, which is the very definition of being heroic. So I thought that adds to the hero's journey. I thought it was well done to have this moment.
Yeah, our two young heroes are going through a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And if you've lived long enough, you've gone through dark nights of the soul. I know I have.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't know if you're coming out of it. You don't know. And in this moment, she doesn't know. And keep in mind, she's also dealing with the specter of someone told her she's gonna die very soon.
That part.
Yeah, yeah,
So back to Curtis and Angela.
yeah.
Again, nanotechnology. Alva, we now know that Alva made his money, made his technology based on nanotechnology.
In part,
Why
100%.
is so now why is that important? Because Angela, who now owns Alva Industries and all the toys that come with it, decides to use nanotechnology and mix it with what? Quantum juice.
Yes.
For those who are new to Milestone, what is quantum juice?
So quantum juice is an unstable form of plasma, right? I mean, listen, I'm not the genius Dwayne McDuffie was, God rest his soul, but basically, there's a scientific principle called Planck's constant, and Q juice is unstable plasma that does not obey the rules of Planck's constant. And so when the Big Bang happened, at the quantum level, perception affects reality, right? So when that gas dropped, a bunch of people thought they were going to die, and they did. And those that didn't think that they were going to die, their self perceptions of themselves defined their mutations, right? And so Alva Industries created the Q juice. So they had the unstable plasma. And as the leading scientific organization on planet Earth, they certainly have nanotech.
So what happens when you mix nanotech and quantum juice? You
You
bring back Edwin Alva.
you bring back this elder statesman narcissist, right? And
With quantum juice from the Blood Syndicate.
from the blood of the blood syndicate, which is why Angela had sanctioned capture them, because this is an experiment that Edwin Alva activated, and we won't talk about why. You got to buy the book, or if you've read it, you know why. But I'll say two things. Number one, so let's talk about narcissists and let's talk about billionaires. So I've read a number of books by Douglas Rushkoff, and he writes this book called Survival of the Fittest, and basically like how the billionaires are gonna escape and leave us all behind, and the kind of systems within capitalism that were designed to create the ultra elite. I will answer Mr. Watson's question in a few minutes.
That's exactly my next question.
So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal, and I think the first investor in Facebook, he is working on cryogenics because he wants to prevent death. Now, I want you to think about this. The man has billions of dollars, and he wants to prevent the thing that is inevitable in all existence, right? Because for billionaires, and I'm no expert, I'm doing some extrapolating based on my readings. There is no end. There is not enough. There is only the frontiers conquered and the frontiers unconquered, right? So for Edwin Alva, for reasons to be revealed, superhumanity was a frontier unconquered. And when when Angela Alva hired Sanction to get the blood syndicate to kickstart her brother's evolution, in Shadow Cabinet 1, and they have the conversation, you don't know it's Angela yet, right? He asked her, is this a clear bag operation or a black bag operation? And she says clear bag. So a black bag operation is garbage. You throw it out. A clear bag operation is recycling. So you keep it to use it later. So that was basically code for don't kill them. Like, bring them to me so I can give them a different purpose, right?
It was also cool with Sanction because he's an amoral character. It doesn't matter which way it is. I don't care. Just let me know what my purpose is.
Sanction is a person that has learned that ideology is based on who is leveraging the ideology, right? He talks about the fact that he used to believe that if he was an instrument for justice, that he could help contribute to a better world. That's when he was in the CIA. And he's since learned that that's all a fallacy, right? And so he decided, well, I decide what justice is, right? So he has his own ethos, you know. And so he's a mercenary. And so from his perspective, you've got these super-powered kids. Any one of them is the equivalent of like an atomic bomb. Should they be running out there with that kind of power? And they have it, and they don't really know what to do with it.
Right.
Because from his perspective, he's a man in his 60s, and they're like in their 20s or whatever. So he sees Angela Alva as kind of closer to him. You know what I mean? So it's a bit more nuanced than that, but that's his perspective, and that's what leads us to this.
So go to Damon Watson's question. I mean, you can't look at Edwin over here and not think of Dr. Manhattan.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So
let's talk.
You could think of Dr. Manhattan. You could also think of Captain Atom.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Okay, so as you pointed out, this was a very dense issue. And so I really had to think about, well, how can we organically pack everything into this one issue? And so what we decided to do was to basically model the Watchmen page style.
I was about to
mention. If you look throughout this book, 9 panel pages, 7 panel pages, 6
not
panel
not a bunch of splash pages.
No, they're very few. And the template for this issue in particular is Watchmen issue 4, which is the origin of Dr. Manhattan. So
that's dope.
Layers upon layers.
Layers upon layers. You packed a lot into us by going old school. It, you know, for those who may not understand, if you ever pick up an old comic from like the Bronze Age or the Silver Age, and you could have a page count that's similar to what we have today, but as you read it, there was always more story in those older books because they didn't use as many splash pages. They used smaller panels. And if you look at this book, he literally has 9-page panels on multiple pages, and he packs in so much more story as a result. So you definitely get your money's worth with this issue.
Yeah.
So then let's switch over to one of Milestone's most popular characters, Static.
One of the world's most popular superheroes, right?
I was trying to be kind.
Forget that. Let's just keep it real.
His family knows, obviously, that he's now Static.
100%.
But as you pointed out, his job is to protect his family at this point. But the world around them is falling apart. The Blood Syndicate's been captured. Although they're viewed as quote-unquote criminals, for the community in Dakota, specifically in Paris Island, they're known as somewhat protectors or heroes. They at least run Paris Island. Virgil is feeling some kind of way because ultimately he is a hero, and he's wondering, having second thoughts about only staying on his block when a larger world needs help. It's interesting that his mother's the one to come to him and talk about that. You would normally think it'd be the dad. He'd be like, "Oh, son, let me pat you on the back and tell you to go out there and kick ass. But in this instance, it's his mother that comes out.
Yes.
And she takes a different approach, not a macho testosterone approach of, I know you're my son, I know you're powerful, you can go kick the bad guy's butt and come back and save the day. She approaches Virgil from the other side of the spectrum. Virgil, you love people. You believe in justice. You must follow your heart and be the hero that you can be. And she gives him this line that I thought was cool. The world is burning. People are losing hope. Shock them, son. Sort of alluding back to the idea of the static shock persona that from the cartoon.
Yes.
Talk about this. Because you could have done the father to have this conversation, but you used the mother instead.
No, it had to be the mother. It had to be the mother because the Black woman in the family is really the heart.
Speak on it.
Right? And in the Static Shock cartoon, Virgil did not get to have a conversation like this with his mom.
Right.
And so it had to be his mother. And what his mother is doing here is giving him permission. Because he's 17 years old. He feels guilty because he just saved his family from Nazis and Icon versus Hardware. And he's like, I can't live in a world without my family. Like, this Virgil Hawkins could not endure the death of his mother and still be the same person, or his sister Sharon, or his dad. And so he's like, I'm going to stay here. Like, when we had the last interview, what I said to you is, in my mind, after Icon versus Hardware, and he saves his family and everyone on the block, and he cracks these jokes. Like, in my mind, that night he cried alone in his room, and like the next time there was something on the news, and he looks at the news and he looks at his family having dinner in the kitchen, and he just goes over there and he says, "Hey, pass me the mashed potatoes." And he never leaves them again. His mother, Jean, knows that he is so much more important to the world. But he needed the permission. She needed to say, it's okay, you can leave us, because we will die. We will all die. But you survived a thing that killed so many beautiful Black babies, that your purpose is higher and you are needed. I give you permission to go. And she asked him a question. She asked him, what do you want for this world? And when you're asked a question like that, the way you answer it tells people who you are here. And he didn't want to answer it. He hesitated. And she told him to speak his truth. And he said, I want justice. I want a just world. And she's like, okay, then go out there and fight for the just world. So, surprise them. Surprise the people who are burning the world down. Surprise the people who don't think tomorrow's going to be better. You, young Black man, you shock the world. You show them who the fuck you are. You show them who the fuck we are and who we have always been.
I'm tearing up right now, man.
That's
hardcore.
Shock them.
Shock the world. All right. So it's time, Angela. So here's the thing. Curtis has been, sitting here through this interrogation. Yeah. You don't see him yelling. You don't see him looking scared. He's just sitting there. He's listening.
Yeah.
He's letting the supervillain have their monologue, as they so often do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, supervillain. Tell me your evil plans because you're such a narcissistic person,
Yeah.
and reveal to me all of your secrets, and let me figure out how I can defeat you.
Yeah.
So he's listening to her, Angela, give her sort of whole, here's my evil origin story. Here's why I hate you. Here's why I want to defeat you. And here's the way that I'm going to do it. I present you my brother Edwin Alvin, who we made, and I'll give you the recipe as to how we made him. We made him with nanotechnology and Q juice from the Blood Syndicate.
Yeah.
And and I love this moment. Curtis is like, okay, is that it? Is that the whole thing? Okay, cool. So here's the thing. I'm Curtis Metcalf. I'm an engineer. I build things. I think 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
And guess what? I have a team.
Yeah.
I love this part.
Yeah. So
you don't get to see. Go ahead. Ahead.
Yeah, it means a lot of things. Number one, as you pointed out, it's like I think on a chess level.
Right.
Right. And you gotta build something for good days, and you gotta build something for bad days, and you gotta build something for the worst possible day. And Edwin Alva, as a superhuman, is the worst day that humanity will ever know, right? So he did that. But the second thing is, he knows this is it for him. He doesn't get out of this. He can't get out of this, right? And then the third thing, which I'm not going to dig too much into because I feel like people should read and experience it, is Angela's a mirror image of Curtis in a way. There's an emotional thing that Angela wants, and it's a thing that Curtis wanted. And so when this all unravels, he recognizes that in her.
Is it the validation? Is it the validation
bingo
from Edwin?
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just wanted the dude to acknowledge you as his blood. And you don't get that. Just like this man wanted to be acknowledged as the heir apparent and didn't get it, right? And that's something that resides in the core of a lot of us for human beings. We're looking for validation from someone.
Right.
Maybe we're looking for validation from 5,500 friends on a social media platform. Right? But a bunch of us are looking for it from somebody. And with these two, it was the same person, tragically. Yeah. So there's a tragedy to Angela Alva, right? But he knows, like Curtis knows, this is the final act of this point of his life. And so, in case of emergency, break glass.
Break the glass. Who's the first part of that broken glass? Tiffany Evans.
Tiffany Evans.
Who in the original Milestone run took on another persona.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that? She gets a box delivered from Curtis Metcalf. Says
yes,
CM
yes.
Deliveries. I'm guessing
Deliveries.
CM stands for Curtis Metcalf.
Bingo. So
what's in the box?
Yep. You find out in Shadow Cabinet 4 what's in the box. It's not a human head. It's not a human head. But you're gonna find out in Shadow Cabinet 4 what's in the box. But also think about this. Think about the irony that he is now recruiting his ex-lover, who now works for the woman who captured him and bound him, right? Like, he's doing this end run around her boss.
Right.
Yeah.
But the question becomes, did he plan that? Like, was it a setup to have Tiffany? Did he anticipate 5 steps ahead, chess master wise, that Tiffany would ultimately be recruited by Angela and she's kind of a plant? I mean, it's just The whole thing's just messing with my head, and I
it's
gotta
crazy.
wait for the next issue to find out.
I will tell you this. She's not a plant. Like,
Okay.
what's happening between her and Angela is sincere from both ends.
Right.
I will say this. So responsible people, once they reach a certain age, they create a will. They don't know if, when they die, how they die. But if they die, then there are recipients. There are recipients of legacies. There are recipients of resources, right? And in the scenario that was his end, in some way, shape, or form, Tiffany Evans is worthy, and he kind of did her wrong. They were lovers and he was of a senior position. And I'm not going to say he broke her heart, because she's not that fragile, but she was affected, and so part of that is, again, he recognizes people that are better than him. And he's
Right.
like, you're better than me. And you always were better than me. And when we broke up, it wasn't you. It's because I'm the bastard. And I never said to you, I'm sorry. But here, whatever that is, whatever that means.
All right. So we're gonna have to wait till next issue to see what.
Yeah, you
where
gotta
that.
wait till next issue to see what's in the box.
What's in the box and who else is part of this team?
Right.
Now, Icon. He's been on milk boxes for a minute now. We don't know where he is, what's he doing, what's he been up to. We finally get a first glimpse of that. Here's the space station. He's doing his whole Blue Marvel thing where he's in this remote base, watching over the world.
Yeah.
What has he been up to? Can you tell us, or are we gonna have to wait?
It's we never really say it so bluntly, but basically, and this is implied in the conversation that Raquel and Curtis have in Shadow Cabinet 1. Like, basically, he's out there watching space as Earth's line of defense against the next Brainiac.
Right.
Instead of being here and Brainiac surprises him, like, he's out there, right? And basically, like, no extraterrestrials with malicious intent get past me, because this is my home. And if I have to protect it from off it, then I'll do that. But we're not going to have another Brainiac day. That's out. Right? So he's been watching space, but of course, Earth is his home. So he's been watching Earth, and he sees the aftermath of the battle that Sanction had with the Blood Syndicate, which government officials are looking at what happened and all these blown up things, destroyed buildings, bombs, right? And they're like, oh, this is an opportunity to take this city back. So they put out the propaganda in the media that it was a terrorist attack, thus allowing the president to give consent for military insertion of the National Guard to seize Paris Island.
Wow. Almost sounds like a storyline from today's headlines.
Hey, listen. Hey, listen. I don't know what you're talking about. But yes, these things in life, again, echoes, right? There are patterns. There are patterns to regimes. There are patterns to micro-fascism that then leads to macro-fascism. There are patterns to separating Black people from their homes, right?
Break it
In
down, Joe.
massacres, in towns maybe one in Oklahoma, for example. There are these echoes that happen throughout our lives. And unfortunately, one of them is forced seizure of land. Right?
You are an educated man, Joe Illidge.
Try to read.
So one of the things that you said was, what's one of the worst case scenarios you could have? Not just an Edwin Alvin, but a superpowered, you know, cosmically powered, I guess, Edwin Alva. What's the first thing he decides to do is to remove his opposition. He goes after Icon. Why? What's going through his head, do you think?
Yeah. So
is that a spoiler for issue 4?
This is the story that he tells himself.
Yeah.
The story he tells himself, or the story he tells us, is that it's similar to the Batman argument, right? Which is Bruce Wayne puts on the costume to become Batman. And then suddenly all these other costumed people emerge to fight Batman, right? It's nature, right? It's copycat, right? Now, what we're talking about is a kind of xenophobia, right? Because Edwin Alva saw Brainiac come and almost lay waste to everything, right? So from his perspective, who is to blame for this alien invasion? Why another alien? How do we know that you and Brainiac aren't in league with one another?
Right.
Did Brainiac come here because of you? Right? So if I am going to take on this evolved position, then you must go so that no such instance could happen again where your presence here attracts other people like you. Now, of course, this is, euphemism for xenophobia, right? But this is the narrative that Edwin Alva is painting today.
So from Edwin's perspective, he's the hero.
Well, listen, from no villain's perspective, are they anything but the hero? Right? From no villain's perspective, are they the villain?
So I love this page.
Yes.
Because we talked about how the beginning of this book began with narration from Dharma,
Yes.
The ultimate puppet master. And he's talking about how he's controlling things. All these things he has set in motion. All of these threads that he as the puppet master have been pulling upon.
Yes.
We've got this confrontation between Curtis and Angela. We've got the creation or resurrection of Edwin Alvin. We've got the refocus of Static to come back on the scene. You've got the confrontation between Icon and a souped-up Alva. You've got the Blood Syndicate captured. That's a thread that needs to be further evaluated. And then you've got Rocket with her new suit. Even though she knows she's destined to die, still throwing herself into the fray.
Yes.
All of these threads are left outstanding. And who's there to pull on them? Edwin Alvin. Yes. I mean, not Edwin Alvin. Dharma.
Yes. Dharma. Leader of the
shadow cabinet. And just as a reminder, because you see Iron Butterfly at the bottom, he still has his own group, the Shadow Cabinet.
Yes.
To enter the fray on this.
Yes.
This is a lot of tie up. The next issue is it the final issue?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a 4-issue series, so the next issue is like there's no time to go to the bathroom.
The next issue is going to be crazy.
There's no time to go to the bathroom in the next issue, dude. And so, yeah, the thing is, so let's talk about causality.
Yeah.
You know, one of the differences between good writing and bad writing, and this is something, there's actually a YouTube video with Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, where they talk about this, I think, to a class at MIT. They talk about but therefore, right? So like bad writing is this happens, but this happens, but this happens, then this happens, and this happens. Good writing is this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens, right? Causality throws things off. Rocket threw things off when she rejected Dharma's offer to join the Shadow Cabinet, right? Angela Alva threw things off when she hired Sanction to get the Blood Syndicate. Sanction capturing the Blood Syndicate leads to the military insertion into Paris Island, which leads to the reactivation of Static. If she had never done that, Virgil would still be at home, just protecting his hood. See what I'm saying? And so Dharma is looking at things, and he's like, okay, crap, this girl said no, which means this entire line of events no longer exists. Now there are tangents. I've gotta leverage this tangent in this direction, which is why he gave up Curtis Metcalf's location to transit to accelerate that whole thing, right? It's like the dude is literally in real time trying to prevent the apocalypse. And we
How
go.
does Edwin know where Icon is?
I mean, he's Edwin Alva. He owns the largest scientific think tank industrial organization in the world. He can't see that thing right there.
Yeah, flying out there.
We've got microscopes that can see millions of miles away. The dude is right there, right? But no one's looking up there but him. And he was always keeping tabs on that dude. That dude was just an annoyance to him before at best, but his position is now evolved. Now you're more than an annoyance. Now I gotta deal with you.
Right.
You see?
So what can we
expect? Go back to that last page? I want to give a shout out to somebody.
Yeah.
So Adagun Ilhan, who is the artist of this page, which is just like when this came in, like we were all losing our minds. This is actually an homage to a Frida Kahlo painting called The Love Embrace of the Universe, the Earth, Mexico, myself, Diego, and Senor Zolotl. And when I was trying to think about what would be the page to end on symbolically and to see these different pieces of the cosmic chessboard, I saw that Frida Kahlo painting. I mean, the universe just brings things together. And I saw it by accident, and I was like, that's it. So we didn't want to clone that Frida Kahlo painting, but we wanted to kind of acknowledge it, but twist it around a little. And so I sent that to Adagun Ilhan, and like he did his part, and then Chris Sotomayor did his part, and what you get is this just like bananas final page of the issue. It's absolutely bananas.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to shout out those two brothers.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, that's why I wanted to include it in these last 2 pages.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Works of art.
Yeah.
So, issue 4.
Yes.
The finale.
Yeah.
This picture on the left needs to be a poster.
100%.
This isn't the first time I've said that about some of the stuff that's come out on this series. I love this picture.
Listen, so this is by Dennis Cowan, Prentice Rollins, and Chris Sotomayor. And this, when Marquise, kind of gave the assignment, he wanted this to be, no pun intended, but iconic. Like, there are certain shots of heroic groups that you see that are evergreen, that can last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. You can look at them and say, bang, that's the core idea, right? So this is the return of heroes, and this is quintessential milestone here, right? And listen, it should be a poster. It should be as big as life. It's very symbolic. And then on the right you have, by Nicholas Draper Ivey, Static and Rocket. And I won't get into exactly what that image means, but again, these two have really been through a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've got to go have the fight. Like, Virgil, for the first time in 6 months, is going to go out there and he's going to come across something bigger than himself. And Rocket is going to try not to die. Right? And so their paths will cross, and let's see what happens. But the next issue is mean. It's a mean issue, man.
Static and Rocket seems like they would make a great duo. I'll just say that.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. They're lovable kids. Don't we love them?
Shout out to Dennis Cowan. Sir, if you're still on and watching us, if you have the original art for this, please bring it down with you. He's going to be down here this week.
Oh, really?
In Orlando, okay. Florida.
Oh my goodness!
I'm at Orlando at OAX, the original art.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're watching, if you have the original art to this, please bring this down. I'd love to see this in person.
People can see it. Shout out to Reggie Hudlin for making an appearance, huh?
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel blessed to have all three of you on this live. Wow. So let's jump into our questions. Our people have been patiently waiting.
All right.
Hope my producer is still there. Are you there, Dr. Wizard? Here we go. How is the Milestone universe continuation looking?
Wow. It's interesting. This is what I will say. I will say that, Milestone is really indelible in, North American comic books, certainly in global culture, due to the Static Shock cartoon, which then led to Static and Rocket appearing on Young Justice, right? And so Shadow Cabinet 4 ends in a way which can open doors. And I feel confident that Milestone will continue, and how it will continue, that's conversations, with Reggie and Dennis and, Marquise Draper and Chris Conroy. And so the different minds have to come together, but the importance of this story is to really bring everything together. And what does that mean for different people? Not all of the stories are going to end well, and that's just the fact, right? So I would say, there's really a good shot at a continuation. What that continuation looks like, we'll see, but this story is really going to set up some bright possibilities.
It absolutely does. I mean, you bridge gaps between Milestone 1, Milestone 2.0, between Milestone 2.0 and this. I would consider this basically the current Milestone continuity.
Yeah.
And you bridged that gap, but then you opened up some new doors, revealed some secrets, and by doing that, opened up new doors for possibilities for what I would call Milestone 3.0, so to speak, or season 3, I guess it would be, right?
Yeah.
You really laid the foundation for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's It's just been a real joy working with everyone on this, and I think what people are seeing is that we're just putting both feet into this. This is not a
You are.
casual story. This is a story of magnitude and scope. It's really ambitious.
And I love the fact that you really put your heart and soul into it. It clearly shows.
Thank you.
Question for Joseph: before you really broke out, what kept you going and or inspired you to keep moving forward?
Wow, that's a really good question. It's not a simple answer. I will say this. Um, there are certain things that in life that we don't think will happen, or they could happen, but we're not thinking about that because we're in the here and now. And Dwayne McDuffie's death was something I had not conceived. Sure, it could have happened. Never thought about it. And one day he's not here. And I was activated in a way that I didn't know was possible for me. So it's so wild. It's so wild. You know, he said about Mark Gruenwald. Mark Gruenwald, very influential editor at Marvel in the 20th century, very influential writer. A lot of his ideas have shown up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think he once said to me that the tragedy was that Mark Gruenwald did not consider himself a great writer or a great editor. He was someone who was always trying to do the best job. Um, I don't think Dwayne knew that about himself. And his passing made that so clear, right? And it activated a lot of us. So I would say that. I would say the absence of him propelled me to go forward, you know? And listen, in going forward, sometimes you're going to take some hits. You're going to take some hits. Why do you keep going? You keep going because the job has to be done, and we're too stubborn to give up. You know, so that's it.
All right. Next question. Will we see a new hardware updated suit redesigned by Duo as well? Now, I've been asking that question since the last issue, where we saw that reveal behind Curtis of the Hall of Armors. And you saw some new armors that we hadn't seen before.
I'll see you next month. I'll see you next month.
See you next month. All right. Do you find yourself doing a lot of historical and current affairs and science research to write your stories? How do you know where to cut off your research and focus on writing? That's a very good question.
Yeah, those are two questions. One, yes. I have modes where I'm reading more nonfiction than I am fiction. Right? And I have modes where I'm reading 10 different books at once at different points, depending upon what my mood is. Right? So I do a lot of research into history. I read the New York Times. I read the Guardian. You know, funny enough, one of the best journalistic institutions of our time is John Oliver's Last Week Tonight or The Daily Show, right? It's like you watch one of those and you learn a lot.
Yeah,
so
you do.
I research a lot of it. You know, any science or quasi-science I bring to this is really an homage to Dwayne McDuffie, who was a scientific genius. How do you know where to cut off your research and focus on writing? So you can really get lost in research. Research can become kind of addictive. Like, oh man, I've uncovered this. Let me dig deeper and uncover that and uncover that and uncover that. The two things that pull me out of my research hole are deadlines and the need for money. I'm not independently wealthy. So I have to produce things to make money. I have to do the work to make the money. I have to keep the money flowing. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, Shadow Cabinet 3 is due. Then I need to abandon this research on quantum physics and just write the thing and get it to my editor. Or, you know, I'm co-writing this Spawn Universe series called Bloodletter, and I had to do some research into the Creole language for this issue that I'm writing now. And it's like, okay, I could do this all day, but I gotta get this script in to Mr. McFarlane. And so, what gets you to stop is, hey, I have responsibilities. Time to stop now.
All right. Will there be toys coming from Milestone and other merch like clothing?
Oh,
that is a great question.
I hope to God so. It's above my pay grade. But
Look,
I would
love. You just mentioned that you're going to be doing a Spawn series for Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane has McFarlane toys.
Yes, he does.
He has contracts with DC.
Yes, he does.
That seems like a great opportunity when you have another conversation with Todd. Hey, Todd, look, just like a few figures, Icon, Static, a Rocket. Let's just start with those three. Can you please do that?
I'd love it. I'd love to see those characters. And when Todd's company makes the figures, it's the articulation, it's the muscular structure. Oh, McFarlane said an Icon figure is coming this year. Hallelujah. I can't wait to see that. What's really fascinating is when you see people on Facebook and they actually create custom figures.
Custom figures are fantastic.
Oh my God. Like,
I've seen some incredible ones.
I've seen Icon, I've seen Static. It's like, that to me is, you got to give it to those people.
This is the last Static figure that was made.
Wow.
Well, it's technically not. There was another one that was done from the DC version, but I don't really recognize that one. The staticshock one. This is the original,
Yeah.
I need this in a 6-inch Todd McFarlane form.
Wow. Listen, I would love to see his Icon, so I hope that is coming in 2025 this year. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man, that would be great. And yeah, there should just be Milestone merch. You know what I mean? Come on. It's there's so many possibilities. So, hopefully, let's see. Listen. Yes, to what Mr. White is saying. Yeah, I mean, my God.
Shout out to Kanan White.
Scale.
Milestone 1/4 scale collectibles would be crazy too.
Yeah. There's another statement that McFarlane's making, Icon. Well, listen, I better leave some money aside in the bank account now, because when that comes out, I gotta have it. I may get two, like one to never take out of the box. It could be in the box, and one to put on the shelf. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I plan on doing.
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
Yeah.
Are we going to get any ongoing series, like an Icon Hardware series? Hardware is my favorite character, or maybe a Static ongoing?
Oh my God, that's above my pay grade. But listen, this is something that we've been saying since the very beginning. Sales dictate what companies do. Shout out to, all of y'all here, Black comic lords, and preaching the gospel of the pre-ordering, right?
Yeah.
So I hope that everyone pre-ordered Shadow Cabinet. I hope they got all the covers, because first of all, the covers are flames. And secondly, sales help dictate these things. It's not about like me getting royalties or anything like that. It's about sending the message to these publishers, like, we need more of this. You're not making enough of this. Right?
Doing the vote.
Exactly. That is you going to the polls and voting with your cash, voting with your retailer. So that's something we've been saying since the issue 1 episode, and I continue to say that. So for the people who want it, I hope that they've been buying this. And again, oh, listen, thank you, Mr. Williams, for doing that, because that's what it takes. It takes the real action. You know, you have to do it. You know, I Black Lightning is on my pull list. Storm is on my pull list. Right? It's like, you want to see more, you gotta pre-order it. You have to
Message.
You have to create the demand in metrics that companies understand, that companies respect.
Yeah. Next question. Will the final issue be a double-sized issue or just a regular-sized issue?
It's a great question. It will be a single-size issue, which will have the content of a double-size issue.
Back to our old
issue 3.
Panel. Just like issue 3.
Issue 3 was jam-packed. Issue 4 is gonna be jam.
I do not feel cheated at all in issue 3. I finished that issue literally going back and checking the page count. Like, did they put extra pages? No, they just packed it all in there with smaller panels, and I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you to the team for actually pulling it off. Because when I said it in the script, I was like, okay. And I imagine, some people were like, man, I'm gonna kill this guy. But we pulled it off, and it looks amazing. So shout out to Daryl Banks, Adagoon Ilhan, Dennis Cowan, Prentice Rollins, Chris Sotomayor, and Lettering Studio and World Design.
I think he already answered this question.
Yeah, I already answered that, but I'll answer it again. So basically, Icon's, satellite headquarters is not a distance from Earth that Alva Industries technology cannot detect it. So, and let's be clear, if we really want to get down to the get down of this, Alva's been keeping an eye on Icon for a long time. You're not going to be Edwin Alva and not be keeping an eye on Icon. That's just bananas. So he's had his eye on him, and now he has the means to take him out for real.
Does anyone know the name of the women that Ms. Alva climbed the mountain to see, but they rejected her? I remember seeing them in a prior issue with Rocket. The Love Corps.
The Love Corps. The team is called the Love Corps. The leader of the Love Corps had a short romance with Icon. Her name is Xiomara.
Xiomara,
Xiomara, right? And I don't think a lot of the other members were named yet. There's definitely a young lady. I think her name is Lil Bit, and she can shrink, right? So there's a number of members of Love Corps who are still very much a mystery, right? And that was something that, I wanted to make sure we maintained the mystery of them. But it was very important for you to see that Xiomara represented visually like the rejecting of Angela Alva from this elite society of women.
I think when we do our next episode, we need to do a recap of how you've expanded the Milestone universe. You've revealed that there was a previous shadow cabinet or multiple previous shadow cabinets. Mm-hmm. You've revealed there was a previous hardware. Mm-hmm. You've revealed that Dharma's been around for a long time, being a puppet master in multiple scenarios. You've expanded the Alva family. It's just there's so much meat on the bone that can be exploited in the future. And as a Milestone guy, I appreciate that. We're gonna have a big the next episode's gonna be big.
That's awesome. Let's go. Oh, okay, yeah, he's talking about this. Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're not doing work for a client and they have a deadline, you have to learn to self-impose deadlines, because there's this saying It goes a little something like this. This is not exactly it, but basically, perfectionism is procrastination in disguise, right? So basically, we want the thing that we put out to be perfect. There is no such thing as perfect.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you've got to pull the trigger and do the thing. And that's the best thing you were capable of that day. You put it out in the world. Some people are going to like it. Some people are not. You'll get some constructive criticism. Use that. The next thing you put out is better. But you have to begin the process. I mean, listen, writing, me writing this, every issue of and I had the 21-page outline, which, by the way, as I'm writing, things change. Things organically change. But, you start the script and there's a blank sheet on your computer and you're like, how the hell am I going to do this? Right? How the hell am I going to do this? Right? But then you're like, okay, you know what? I know how to do this. I'll figure it out. We'll get there as we go along. Right? So that's the thing. But you have to start. Right? So you have to impose the deadline on yourself. Absolutely. And going back to what you're saying earlier, Paul, I think part of the fun of world building and telling these big stories is creating these opportunities for other people to come on and pull on a thread. Right. And so that, when Reggie and Dennis and myself and Marquise and Chris Conroy, when we had the big meeting, think about it that way. And when we talk about issue 4 and when we get to the end, I will reference something very specific that is evocative of what I wanted to do from a writing perspective. So we'll talk about that next month. Is this shadow cabinet still the JLA as run by the CIA? I'll see you in a month. We'll talk about issue 4, and then we'll talk about what the shadow cabinet means.
That's good. Issue 4 is going to be huge.
And then when you read issue 4, it will take you back to the origin of the shadow cabinet issue 2, and you'll be like, I see. Right. So we'll talk in a month.
I'm looking forward to that book. What's our next question? That's it. That's everything he said.
All right. Those are all the questions. Those are some great questions.
Well, Joe, I really want to appreciate you for agreeing to do this show with us. Thank you for a fantastic issue. Thank you for continuing the saga that is Milestone. Thank you for your world building of Milestone. I'm looking forward to issue 4. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you, fans. Thank you, though, everyone who's been pre-ordering this book. Keep up the good work. There's so much in the world that we can do to help these creators make these books that we so enjoy. Please like this video, share it on your social media, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. It helps us out, costs you nothing, and helps us to get the word out and spread and grow the channel. We'll catch you next month for the next episode of Shadow Factor with Joe Illidge when after issue 4 drops. Black Comic Lords, we got you.